If you're a residential real estate agent earning $200,000 a year and you want to grow your passive income, this show's for you. Learn the secrets other agents use and hear from experts in our field in order to guide you along your journey to investing in assets like apartment communities so that you can turn your commissions into cash flow. I'm Randall McLeod. Let's go, baby. All right, welcome back to Agents Building Cash Flow. I'm your host, Randall McLeod. Today, Jeffrey Donis from Donis Investment Group is on the show with me. We're going to go through kind of how we got started, how we dropped out of college in order to start into real estate investing, give you some tips on raising capital if you are in that space, and overall just going to tell us what he's seeing in the market right now. So it's an awesome show. I love talking to Jeffrey. I love, hearing what him and his brothers are up to. They have a ton of energy and it's just great to see what they're doing in the space. So without further ado, here we go. Let's jump in. Okay. Without further ado, Jeffrey Donis, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Randall. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So Jeffrey, you are the investor relations for Donis Investment Group, right? So sure. I just want to jump in. Like, what's the number one thing that your limited partners are asking you whenever they're looking at a deal that you've got?
Yeah. So typically, I try to, I guess, when I'm first talking to a limited partner, my first thing is to really learn more and ask them some questions. So I like to really understand what they're looking for. Is it depreciation? Is it cash flow, appreciation? So I try to get an idea as to what that is. So that way we can keep them in mind for specific deals. But on top of that, I want to understand what their purpose is behind investing in the first place. We like to obviously take a lot of action, but we like to have a purpose behind the action that we take. So I like to really discover why they're investing with me and how I can sort of help them achieve that goal. For our company, it's to help most of our investors build some type of life by design, meaning that they're going to have some type of time freedom, location freedom, and of course, financial freedom. So that they can spend their time doing what they like to do. So those are typically some things that I try to figure out when I'm first speaking with my investors. Got it.
So what I guess what's like the ideal scenario? Is it more on the freedom front? They're trying to replace some active income, or are they more a high net worth and they already have money that they're set aside that needs to be invested? What does your typical investor look like?
Yeah, I would say majority of them are high net worth individuals who are focused on a certain career path outside of real estate. And with that income, they're choosing to invest it so that they can eventually retire from that career and then be a passive investor full time. That's typically where my investors are coming from. I have some that are non-accredited who are newer to the investing space, who we have to go a little bit slower with, but they're not necessarily as, I guess, established in their careers. So they're looking to expedite their financial journey and get to that financial freedom goal sooner. And our goal is to help them do that.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's take it back a little bit. How, and I know it's you and your two brothers. So you guys, I follow your pod. I listen to what you guys are putting out. Heard one the other day and you guys were talking about, or I think the interviewee you had on was talking about, you guys had a goal to, I think, buy your mom a house. Is that kind of like what you guys are working toward? Have you done that? Have you tell me kind of how'd you guys get partnered up? Did you guys do any single family or did you guys just jump into multi, and then kind of like the why behind it?
Sure. You don't mind. I'd love to start from not too long day one,
sure.
But from the beginning of the journey.
Well, I was born,
3 years ago.
Not that far back. Yeah.
Not that far.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that long ago, but yeah. So I was a college freshman about 3 years ago at a local university here in North Carolina, and I was studying gen ed at the time, as I'm sure most college freshmen do. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with my life, but I grew up in a low income household. So my single mother raised my brothers and I have two brothers and then one sister. So while I was at school, my older brother found Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and he'd also came across wholesaling single family real estate on YouTube. So eventually we started taking action on wholesaling. It took us about 6 months to actually get our first deal in real estate. But eventually, with a lot of cold calling and a lot of effort, we were able to get it. And throughout that process, we were also starting to read a lot of books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich. That really changed our mindset from thinking as if we're going to go to school, get a job, to get a degree, and then get a job, and then kind of work our way up the corporate ladder. that was what we envisioned at first. But once we read Rich Dad Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich, we realized that as an entrepreneur, we can achieve our goals at a certain different path, going more of a non-traditional route, which was real estate for us. So once we hit wholesaling, we got our first deal. Fast forward, we ended up starting to do multiple deals. We did about 15 deals that first year, and we realized that it was going to be something that we could scale. And we always, initially, we got into real estate to retire our single mother. That's still our goal. We're not at that point yet. We want to do it with passive income, and we still have to, purchase a few more properties to do that. So we're on the path to doing that, but now we're in multifamily and we're full-on operators. So I skipped a little bit of that journey, but to answer your question, it started with the goal of retiring our single mother, and that's our collective why. So that's really what unites us and what got us into business together.
Yeah. So did you finish school, or you were like, oh man, I found wholesaling, I'm out. Let's do it. Real estate.
I skipped over a big part, yeah. So my freshman year, COVID hit halfway through. I think I was like a few months out of finishing my freshman year, and we got sent home because of COVID. So at that point, I had more time to put towards my business. And I just started really enjoying like building a business and becoming an entrepreneur over school. So I finished that year out, didn't apply again, and I closed my first deal that summer. So knowing that it was something that I could actually make money in, I realized that the reason I was in school personally, obviously to learn, but really was to get a job. And if I didn't need that, then I didn't see why I needed to go back to school. And I thought I could always go back. So I just left school and became a full-time entrepreneur and real estate investor from that point on.
Yeah, solid. Good for you. So let me kind of dive into that. I'll tell you my story just on a high level, because it's kind of comical in the sense that you had that realization, and then it took me actually graduating college, going to work for a guy that went to high school with me who didn't go to college, got a job with him, and he was in real estate, kind of taught me mortgages and real estate. And he gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad and was like, you need to read this. And then, so it was just funny. Like, I went to college. He didn't. He had houses and toys and cars and assets and all the things you want, right? And I get out and I'm in debt and I have all this like fun times that I can talk about, but no houses and no assets. Yeah. So good for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So you guys are still, just jumped into, I guess, the multifamily, and where are you right now? Like how many assets do you guys have? How many doors? Like what's some metrics that you guys are tracking there?
Yeah. So in regards to the multifamily space, we transitioned from single family about 2 years ago. And the reason we did that was because of the scalability of it. So we realized that we wanted to end up in the commercial real estate space in the future, but we thought it was going to take us a lot longer than it ended up taking us. And what was holding us back were these limiting beliefs. We thought we were too young. We didn't have enough money. We weren't educated enough. We didn't have the right people in our network, which were all, like, if you look at it from a certain perspective, they could all be true. But then we just realized those were just things holding us back. So we just decided to not make any excuses and to take action. Eventually, we joined a few different mastermind groups. One of them was Think Multifamily, and that allowed us to get the network. We had access to people who, since we didn't have the money, they did. So now we kind of just do the grunt work. That was what our thought process was. So eventually, fast forward 2 years after joining that group, we were able to partner on over 1,000 units. It's a little around 5 deals. And that's been fortunate enough because of the group that we joined. We've just been able to provide value and also just learn a lot. We've read a lot of books. As I said already, joining those groups come with different courses and things like that. But on top of it all, it's just taking massive action and actually getting a seat at the table on these deals. You start to really learn a lot by actually doing it versus like learning from it about it from a book.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, taking action and iterating over time is absolutely the way to go. 100%. Yeah. I was talking to, and I mentioned this to you on one of the podcast guests was Devin Elder, and his thing is just take action and iterate. Take action, iterate. It's just the speed of implementation. Once you get something up and running, you can make it better over time and get better at it over time. So. Yeah, a lot of the agents and real estate professionals that I speak with, again, they got into real estate so that they could actually own the assets and to like own the real estate, or at least the allure of passive income over time. And then they just get stuck and they never actually start investing. So yeah, do you have any advice for them that, just to, even if it's single family or whatever it is, like what would your advice be to somebody who has never taken that step to actually invest either dollars or time?
100%. So the one thing that has helped us is one, obviously reading the books, and then like Rich Dad Poor Dad, Ken McElroy has some good books called The ABCs of Real Estate Investing and things like that, educating yourself. But on top of that, I think the thing that really will help you sort of like expedite your journey and cut your learning curve is surrounding yourself with people that are doing some things that you may not think are possible or things that you'd like to do in the future. Just by hanging out with them, rubbing shoulders with them, it's almost like it'll make it seem like if all of these people are doing it, why can't I? You start to like trick yourself into thinking like that. For me, from my specific life, I guess, journey, it was in multifamily when I hadn't done my first deal. I started joining mastermind groups with people that were raising millions of dollars, that were closing on 100+ unit apartment complexes. And they were talking about the challenges and the successes they were having. And just by being in the room and asking them questions and just like getting that energy, it's contagious. They like to say success is contagious. I was just always in those rooms, always at those conferences, always on those calls with people like that. And eventually I found myself to finally get into my first deal. And it's literally just nature. Like if you're the kind of person that can take action and you know who you are and you have that work ethic, then it's just a matter of time after you get into those rooms that you'll end up being just like them.
Yeah, for sure. I will attest to that because I met you at a conference and it was you or probably all your brothers. You all just like came straight up and like, hey, this is me. Look, this is what I'm doing. Nice to meet you. And you guys were like on it. So yeah, taking action and getting involved for sure. Build your network. So yeah. So in getting started, I guess, in the multifamily space, we can stay in line with it. Did you raise capital first? Were you going sourcing deals first? Were you doing all the above? Like, what was your foray into the space? Like, what did you focus on mainly?
Yeah. So I work with my two brothers, as I mentioned. And initially when we got into it, we thought we were going to have success finding our own deal. So we started just cold calling brokers. I think we just started adding ourselves to different broker lists and finding phone numbers. And we learned that skill of cold calling in single family since we were cold calling homeowners, which I'm sure a lot of agents do right now, right? They're cold calling homeowners. So we were applying that same skill to the multifamily space. And we quickly realized that we weren't going to get any success because all of these brokers who have access to the deals, they typically will only go to a buyer who they have complete confidence, or at least, a lot of confidence in that they can actually close, because a broker, just similar to an agent, only gets paid if the deal gets closed. That's where they get their commission, and they're not going to choose you if they don't think you can close. And the way that they determine whether or not you'll be able to close is based on your track record. And for us, we didn't have one. So when we were calling these brokers and they were asking us, what deals have we done in this multifamily space, we didn't have anything we could say. So eventually we decided that we needed to find a partner that we could leverage. So that's when we joined TMF. And then once we did that, that's when we started continuing to underwrite deals. But that is like a learning process. So my brother focuses on that. And eventually we did find our deal that we underwrote ourselves, and we took it from point A to point Z. But now at that point, we hadn't actually found it. So I was in the mastermind group. I was having access to different people who were already having success finding deals. So what I did was just network with them, and we raised a little bit of capital. We helped with different things on the marketing side, and we participate on the asset management calls on those deals in particular. But in the beginning, our goal was really just to get onto a deal where we could go through the process, learn a lot about what goes on in the background, so that when it came time for us to be a lead sponsor on our own deal, we wouldn't necessarily be like brand new to it, and we've already had some type of exposure to what goes on.
Yeah, and you have like a template that you can use from somebody else's. Yeah. So, all right. So that makes me think about if you are, I guess, new to the space, or somebody's trying to get started in multifamily. A lot of, just like you said, it can be daunting. It could be definitely not as easy as going and finding a wholesale deal. And finding a wholesale deal is difficult in its own right. It's just a lot of time and labor intensive on your part. But the barrier to entry is very low. And so maybe speak to the number of jobs, or I guess not necessarily difficulty, but like the number of people that either you need on your team, or the partnerships, and how it's like a team sport, because not being, if somebody's a real estate professional, like an engineer or an attorney or something in the space, they may see kind of how many people and moving parts there are, but like it's a lot of work to go and get one of these deals. And so finding a good sponsor to work with and just invest with is helpful. So anyway, just maybe speak to how many moving parts, or how are you picking up what I'm putting out?
Oh, for sure. For sure. So, like, especially there's a book that actually Hunter Thompson, which we're in the same mastermind group with him, Raise Masters, Who Not How. He gave me that book, and I read it, and it talks about exactly what I always used to talk about, which was like, especially when you're new to something, obviously you're not going to know everything about the space, but it helps to have people in your network that you can go to for the answer, which is what we've been able to do in the beginning of our journey. We were just building our network, surrounding ourselves with people who had a lot more experience than us. So initially we did that by finding a mentor. And then once we found the mentor, it was fortunate that he was also able to sponsor on deals for us. And by that, we mean he was going to sign on loans as a key principal. That's typically the person that will sign on the loan. They have to have a certain liquidity, a certain net worth in order to qualify for that loan. And we're going after deals that are worth, $10 to $20 million. So they have to have a certain amount of net worth to be able to qualify to sign on a loan like that. And not just anyone can do that, right? So that's why it's important to have certain people in your network like that. On top of that, when it comes to raising capital, if you're someone that doesn't, have the ability to do that, it helps to have people in your network that can go ahead and help with that. On top of that, there's an asset manager on your team who, once you close, will actually help you by managing the asset and executing the business plan. And I skipped over the acquisitions part. If you're good at numbers, my brother does this for us. He underwrites our deals. And by that, it's just analyzing a deal based on its financials. So you'll plug in numbers into a spreadsheet and determine what kind of return you'll be able to offer your investors. So that's what he plays. Once you have investors in the deal, you obviously want to keep them updated. So there's an investor relations member who's sending out monthly or quarterly updates to the investors. On top of that, there's a property management company, whether that's in-house or a third-party property management team. Those are the people that will actually be on site, managing the asset, turning units. If there's a construction team that's in-house as well, with working with the PM, or that's your own construction team, whoever, those are the people that are actually going to be doing the turns and actually doing the projects and things like that. So as I just mentioned, that's like 5 different roles right there.
At least.
Yeah, exactly. So you have the broker, right? The broker plays a key role. You have an insurance broker. So the broker is the one that's giving you the deal. The insurance broker is the one that's helping you get the most competitive terms for your insurance on the property.
Debt broker.
Yep, exactly. And the mortgage broker, the person that helps you find the best debt for your project. So that's like 10 plus roles right there. And that's the cool thing about it, is you don't have to be able to do everything, as long as you know someone that can help you do it. That's even better. Yeah.
And that somebody could be a solid sponsor like us or like you. It's like, the point, I guess, of asking that question is to highlight that there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot that goes into taking down one of these large assets. And so if you have the time to do all of that, then you're basically going to be on the active side of real estate. But if you don't, then you just find a great sponsor who has the experience and the track record, and you can easily invest and get into those deals. So I talk about a lot of single family stuff and have a course out that's like how you can get into some of these types of investments. But ultimately it's like, do you really want to do that? Or do you want to get into the easiest side of it, which is if you have some disposable cash sitting on the side, then you can put it into one of these investments. So thanks for going through and highlighting that. So how did you guys divvy up the roles? Because raising capital and investor relations is a very you have to be personable, you have to be out there, you have to, all these things, which I think all your brothers are. But how did you guys break up the roles between the 3 of you?
Yeah. So initially when we got started, there was obviously it was a new territory. So my 2 brothers, my twin and then my older brother, they were the first ones to sort of both start to underwrite deals. And I knew I didn't want to do it. I knew I'd already done sales in my previous business. I was the acquisitions rep. So I was already attracted to the raising capital side. And it was very, very scary because I'd never raised money at that point. So I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, well, it kind of makes sense, right? It's like a sales in sales. So I just was immediately, and that was my role from the day one. So that part was easy. But then my two brothers weren't really sure what they were going to do, because it seemed like the other most important role at that point was underwriting. Now, my older brother, he was the one that is willing to do things that no one else wants to do. So that's why he volunteered. And then my other brother is considered the most book smart. So that's why it might have made sense for him to do like the hardest part, which was the math, right? So they were both competing, and eventually my older brother just liked it more. He was the most consistent with it. My other brother didn't really like it. So we were just like, well, we'll have him do it. And then he didn't really have a role at that point. I was doing marketing, plus investor relations and capital raising. And in the beginning, you don't have that much going on when you're raising capital. It's a lot of networking, and trying to stay busy. So I was doing marketing, but as that time went on, I started building my network. I started having more on my plate. And then my twin brother is very, very creative, and he has a gift, and he likes to write. So he's an author, and marketing is storytelling in another sense. So it kind of appealed to him and really falls in alignment with his skills, which is being able to tell a story. So that's why he eventually took over the marketing aspect of our company, which includes newsletters, podcasts, our social media content, and things like that. So that's how it happened. I think for anyone who's starting the business, the way that we found out what our roles wasn't just by like sitting around and trying to like brainstorm. It was by taking action, figuring out what you like to do. And the only way you do that is by actually taking the steps forward. So I don't know. Have you ever heard of Jocko Willenick, his book?
Oh, yeah. I've heard him talk at multiple conferences. Yeah. We went to a special like event that they did for a close knit where they had us doing a bunch of exercises with his team. Yeah, it was solid. They're great.
Yeah, the book Extreme Ownership. Have you read that one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Dichotomy of Leadership is the second. Yeah.
Cover and move. I love making that metaphor where it's like you move a few steps this way, and then if it's not the right way to go, then you go back and move the other way. It's the same thing in business. Like you just take action one way. It's better than staying still and just talking about it. Like I'd rather go in the wrong direction and figure out that was the wrong direction and then go the other direction than not do anything. Right. Yeah. So that's what we did initially.
Yeah. My football coach in high school had a saying that was kind of appropriate here, but it was, if you're going to make a mistake, make it at 100% speed or something so that you get over back, you figure it out faster that way. So the theme of the show is obviously take action, guys. Like get out
quickly.
Yeah. 100% take some action. So I want to ask you something, but before we do, we're going to hear from our sponsors real fast. We're proud to be sponsored by Ridgeline Investment Group. Ridgeline has a track record of transacting more than $53 million in assets throughout Texas. Ridgeline is currently looking to acquire 100 to 200 unit Class B multifamily communities between 5 and 20 million in San Antonio, Temple, Waco, Tyler, and other Texas secondary markets. To learn more about Ridgeline Investment Group, visit www.ridgelineig.com. So, all right, I have a question about raising capital then. Since you're raising capital, I led with this because you're investor relations, but like the number one question that investors ask you. But so like when you first started, it seems like a very daunting task to go and ask somebody to give you some money for a deal. And so how did you frame that in your mind in order to start winning, I guess, investments and commitments? Did you get a check the first deal, the first investor you spoke with? And if it wasn't mom, like somebody that was unrelated.
Oh, no. Yeah. So like initially, the thing was like I didn't really go typically with like everything I do recently and back then when I was first starting. It's never like I have a certain frame of mind because I'm always typically scared when I'm doing something new. I think anyone is or uncomfortable, but I've gotten better at leaning into the discomfort and to the things that are unknown. That's how I've grown, and that's how anyone grows, is by doing things you're not really good at or just things that make them uncomfortable. I think that's like a mechanism that the mind tells you is like, okay, don't do this because it's scary, but typically that's how you grow, right? So when I was going into raising capital, I knew that I just needed to talk to people. That's what I learned from the books. So I started just by trying to talk to as many people as I could, tapping into old teammates and their parents and old friends, people that I met at conferences, things like that. And a lot of rejection is what I was facing initially. And I wasn't really getting anywhere, but I was just kind of relearning that skill of cold calling. It's a similar fear of rejection. And I was kind of becoming numb to that again. And I was like, okay, well, now that I'm not scared to get a no, I'm able to call anyone. So over time, I just kept on doing that. And then eventually I met certain people at conferences, and those were actual legit investors. The people before were probably never going to invest anyways. And I didn't know that at the time, but I had to get through them to get to that point where on the first deal that I tried to actually bring an investor into, the offering filled up so quickly that the investors weren't able to actually get into that deal, which I thought was a failure at the time, but it was actually a very big learning lesson for me and the investors. Yeah. Because on that second deal that I had, it was my investors were the first investors to get into the offering because they thought it was going to be just as fast, and it kind of pre-programmed them
for sure
to know that once I present them something, they have to move quickly. So that's how I was able to get those investors into the second deal.
Yeah. Fear of loss, of not fear of missing out, FOMO there. Well, okay. So you got into it, and now what do you find are, I guess, the biggest challenges of raising capital currently?
Right now, in the current environment that we're in, I would say it's with the rising interest rates. Now, we don't know how long they'll continue to rise. It seems like the Fed is starting to take their foot off the gas. But I think that's the biggest issue, or I guess concern with investors and investor sentiment is they don't know where the economy is going. People think there'll be a recession next year. Also, with real estate prices, a lot of investors, whether you're a seller or buyer, there's not a connection there. So a lot of investors who are looking to invest with us, they're scared and they're sitting on the sidelines. So that's something that we're having to overcome. But I think it just comes down to how well are you educating your investors? How good of a relationship do you have with them? Because with certain people who, like they gave me on a deal that I've been working on in the past, I was talking to them and they were like, well, what do you think is happening like in the future? And I'm like, well, what's the alternative? Like if you're not going to invest, are you keeping it in the bank? Because if they're at a certain sophistication level, or if you've been able to educate them to get to a certain point, then they understand that if they just keep their money in the bank, inflation is going to eat away at it. So if you're not putting your money into an investment, that's not that much. There's not many alternatives, right? The stock market, that's crashing as well. Crypto is obviously not doing too well right now either. Keeping it in the bank, inflation's eating away at it. So real estate seems like a pretty good alternative to me, regardless of what's going on. And then on top of that, when there's less, Warren Buffett likes to say it, when there's blood in the streets, that's when you should be buying. Yeah. So when there's more fear in the market, that's when you should be aggressive and actually interested. And I think it all starts from a foundational knowledge of understanding when it's a good time to buy. So that's our job as operators is to inform our investors about when is the right time to buy and why this is a good time to buy.
Yeah. Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. Yeah, for sure. So, all right. I want to ask you about a best and worst deal, right? Do you have, what's the best real estate deal you've done, or worst? Whichever one you want to start with.
Yeah. So for me, I haven't gone full cycle on the multifamily side of things. So I would say the best deal that I did was, let me think about it. Best learning lesson.
Best learning lesson. Yeah. Or even if it's single family stuff, Okay. You ever walk through a turd infested house, tell me about it.
Oh yeah. So I'll say the first two deals I did, they closed on the same exact day in wholesaling. The first one was a really small deal. That was probably the worst deal based on the amount of money that we made. But on top of that, the second one, the way that we won that first deal that we actually closed on, even though it closed on the same day as the other one, we got that one under contract before the other one. And the reason that one was the best one was not only because we made the most amount of money that we ever made in single family, but it was the way that we got that deal. So it was a lot of follow-up, which I learned through wholesaling. And it's the same principle with raising capital as well. It's a lot of phone calls, and I think a lot of people are scared to call people, but that's one of the skills that you need to have when you're raising capital. To go back to the story, we were traveling to different properties, and at that day that we got the call back from the seller who ended up selling us that property, we were driving back from one property, and she called us back the week before. We had given her an offer that didn't work for her at the time. She told us she was going to keep it as a rental, and eventually she reached back out and was like, you know what, I'm ready to go at this price. If you guys are able to get it done as soon as possible, let's make it happen. And that wouldn't have happened if we didn't continue following up with her, because obviously in any industry, there's a lot of, specifically real estate, a lot of these sellers are receiving a lot of phone calls and they have a lot of options. But if you're able to build a rapport and build a relationship with that seller, you're more likely to get the deal. And that's what I learned from that. So that was the why that deal was my favorite deal.
Big takeaway.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's in general, either if you're investing or if you're a seller, even a buyer. I mean, it's like a timing issue.
Yeah.
And so, we found all the time in our single family investing that it was staying in front of them. I don't know how many times I sent a postcard to the same person, but I guarantee you, like, they're getting my stuff monthly. And then a year later, we tracked all of that. A year later, we'd get a phone call and they're like, okay, it's time for me to sell. So stick with it. It's the same thing on the investor side. I'm sure, they may sell something and come into some money, or something happens and now is the right time for them to invest. But if you haven't been in front of them the whole time talking to them, then they will not think of you. If you, you kind of touched on this, but collectively between you and your brothers, like, what was your biggest fear when you guys first started, either on the single family or the multifamily? Like, what was the number one thing?
100%. It was the imposter syndrome for different reasons. So I was 18 or 19 when I first got into real estate. I come from a low income background. I personally didn't have any money, didn't have a college degree, still don't. I would say like I was less educated than I thought I had to be. And I think we always feel like that, regardless of how experienced you are. So those are the main three things. And then I would say me being a minority could have played like some type of factor, but it really didn't to me. So I won't say that, but it could have. So those are the three main things. I was young, didn't have a lot of money, didn't have experience, and didn't have a lot of knowledge. So those are all things that were like making me scared to get into it, especially when I started doing multifamily, because I'd go to these conferences and see a lot of these older gentlemen who were a lot older than me and seemed to have a lot more experience, a lot more money, a lot better networks. And I couldn't relate to them in many ways. But over time, at first I started reading books and started joining these groups. You start to realize that like a lot of these people want to help you, especially when you're new and young. They really want to pour into you. On top of that, once you start actually getting a track record and you start doing deals, it works to your benefit, I think, because I started doing different things by doing these different things, like creating a podcast, social media content, going to events and networking, building relationships intentionally. So, I'd go to events and like, instead of just having those business cards on my desk and letting them just, forgetting about them, I would actually give them a call and follow up with them and build relationships. And over time, I start to build my credibility by doing all of these things. And my imposter syndrome slowly started to go away over time, just naturally. But initially going into it, I had to overcome all of those things. And it's really just limiting beliefs that I think everyone faces when they're doing something new. But you can overcome it, especially if, in the real estate space, there's people that are looking to help you. So you just have to be able and willing to take massive action.
Action is the key word. That's again. Yeah. Yeah. So, oh my God, man, every time like you're talking and I've got a question that's a follow on to it. And now I have to open my mouth and say something stupid. So, oh no, this is it. I got it. So I really want to know. So in this day and age, what I find, about you and your brothers and guys who are younger getting into it, there's an energy that comes in, and it's like you get to see an old industry with a new, like, fresh eyes, right? And that is certainly how I felt getting into multifamily from the single family world. I'm like, oh man, this is great. Like, what can I see that these guys who have been doing it for so long don't see? How can I add value? How can I decrease expenses in a certain way? How can we do right? What tech can we bring into the operations in order to reduce expenses? That sort of stuff. So the question is, what is like the number one way that you are reaching new investors today? Like, what is it that you guys are doing that has the biggest ROI in your time?
100%. I would say me getting on other people's podcast is better than anything I've ever done. Second to that, because the reason for that is we have systems in place behind the scenes that allow that to be more effective than it used to be. So I used to get on shows like this all the time, and all these people would hear me talk. They'd like what I have to say, but after that, they don't know where to go because I didn't give them any type of call to action. Yeah. And then once I did give it to them, they would get no emails after that or anything like that. But now we have those systems in place, which I can go into, but it would take a little bit. But those are in place now that allow me to build a relationship with people that hear me and that want to build a relationship with me. So that's the first thing. The second thing is actually going in person to different conferences and meeting with people. You'd be surprised, like a lot of operators themselves like to invest. And the cool thing I've realized recently, being, like you said, you're personable. I like to think of myself as a personable person, and I like to build relationships and connect with others. If you can just go to events and really just be humble and genuine and just try to be yourself and authentic, and if you're pretty good at connecting with people, a lot of these operators, especially if you're new and young, they want to help you. So they'll be willing to invest in your projects just if you can connect with them, because they want to see you succeed, right? And you can just call them and kind of put them to the test, see if are they actually going to see you succeed? Like, are you willing to invest with me? So that's certain things that I've tried and it's worked.
Ask for the money. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to be willing
to. So we were talking about investors in returns and how you are going after them, the conversations that you're having with them. But again, in this environment, current economic environment that we're seeing right now, what type of return profile have you guys changed? Like what your targets are for any of your deals and how you're underwriting?
For sure. So I'll start with the criteria and how that's changed. So initially we were open to C-class properties and things like that. But now moving forward, I want to say we're more focused on 1980s properties, B-class in primarily Atlanta and then North Carolina markets. For the reason for that is I was able to speak with a lot of different institutional groups who can typically write bigger checks. And it's not only pref equity, I'm speaking more so in regards to private equity. Now, that's not the only reason. I've talked to other partners who can bring a lot of capital to the table, and that's exactly what they're looking for. So having gone through that, I realized what those kind of partners are looking for. And now I'm tailoring my criteria towards that, especially going into this environment. I want to understand that if I do find a deal, I won't have a problem raising the capital. So that's something that we're kind of tweaking our criteria in the direction of. But on top of that, returns right now, I can forecast that cash flow is already hard to come by, but I think it'll only get harder as things happen. And who knows if we'll get into a recession. But in regards to our pref, we used to offer an 8% preferred return. Moving forward, I'm not opposed to doing a 7%. I think that will be more probable than it used to be, just because cash flow is a little bit harder to come by. So that's the other thing that has changed is cash flow is hard. We see cash flow decreasing since interest rates are going up, our debt service is increasing, meaning our NOI is going down. So our cash flow is going down. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on is what our preferred return will be. And we're just having to educate our investors and explain that to them. As I mentioned, there's not many alternatives outside of real estate, and I think it's one of the best places to be. So I still think it's a good investment, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So are you maybe changing either the asset class? Because I talked to a lot of guys and they're like, well, we were looking at class A, just trying to get a coupon and basically just play some capital, right? Class B value add, dumping a lot of money into an asset right now. Is that still something that you guys are looking to do? Or, are you modifying anything in your buy box, I guess?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, it's class B now is what we were looking for, more so than the class C product that we were looking for last year.
Okay.
1980s vintage, newer deals. I think there's a little bit less return, but a little bit less risk as well, moving into the new environment. And I think there'll be a lot more opportunities for that asset class for us as buyers, as sellers start to be more prone to sell and a little bit more reasonable on their asking price right now. Yeah. I think there's that disconnect. But as data comes out and cap rates continue to hopefully not compress and increase a little bit, right, we'll be able to have more opportunities.
Yeah, that's what we're waiting on and hoping for. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I've been looking at recently is just not even. I'm like, guys, I'm pretty far off. I'll throw you an offer, but don't throw a book at me or something. So you mentioned something about private equity firms. What are they targeting and what kind of return profile are they looking for?
Yeah, good question. I think it depends on the group. So I've worked with a few. I won't act like I've worked with like dozens. It's been a handful, and I've spoken with a lot more than I've worked with. A lot of them some of them are like equity brokers and things like that. I think they're people to be careful of. They don't all tend to actually pan out. But in regards to what most of them are looking for, as I mentioned, they're looking for a class B or A product. Typically what I found was class B, 1980s vintage or newer, in really good areas, A or B areas. And then they're looking for 100, typically closer to like the $10 million plus equity size. So those are like 200 plus units, depending on the market. But some are looking at the 100 to 250 range, which is what we look at. But a majority of the groups that I spoke with are looking at 200 or more units, which would be a $10 million check size or greater when it comes to the equity. So that's what they're looking for. And that's really why I think if we can get into that, if we can find that kind of deal, the capital will not be an issue.
Yeah.
And I know people will say, like, if you find the right deal, the capital won't be an issue.
Yeah.
It's not true. That's not true in my opinion. Like, if you find a deal that works, like a really good deal, then it shouldn't be an issue. But you still have to have the network, the track record, and things like that in place.
Yeah. And you have to be able to win the deal. You can't do you can't win the deal if you don't. Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting. So, but what I didn't hear you say is what kind of return are they looking for on those types of deals? Just in general, high level, like, are they looking for mainly just like a straight preferred return? Are they looking for a split? Are they, like, what have you seen?
Yeah, I think it depends again, but for like most of the deals that we're looking at, it depends. I think a lot of these groups are looking at anywhere from 6 to 8%. They're not like, most people are reasonable. 10% cash on cash and multifamily right now, I don't think that's common at all. And we're not finding deals like that. And I don't think all these groups are any different. So I'd say anywhere from 6 to 8% is what they're probably looking for.
On a pref, are you doing any kind of split?
Yeah, 6 to 8% on cash. And then on the pref, I've seen anywhere as low as 5% up to 7%. 8% right now is hard to come by, even for our deals. We used to do 8%.
Okay. But they're not coming in as kind of like a debt fund and just putting investing, I guess, like a pref equity type split where it's just a preferred return that they're getting. You're still giving some, not to get into the details. Yeah. We're not offering any securities here. We're just talking like high level, like. Yeah,
there's no in particular deal that I'm referring to. But I think it depends. It depends. So like a pref group would be a group that is more so second position to the first position mortgage.
Yep.
It would be second position, similar to mezzanine, but it's not necessarily mezzanine because, from my understanding, there's no lien on the property. It's just like a guarantee from the sponsor typically. Now the pref group, they'll typically just get a preferred return and then some type of accrued payment on the back end. And then a private equity group will either be a co-GP and come on as a partner, or they'll just be an LP, meaning they'll just get a passive investment.
So whatever your waterfall is on that deal, that's that they're agreeing to come in to that sort of thing. Exactly. So are you focusing more on that type of private equity firm? Like you'd prefer them to come in as LPs on a deal?
Yeah, I think that would be like ideal for, from my understanding and for my company, we prefer a group to come in as an LP. Mm-hmm. Now, depending on like what it looks like, if they're willing to come in and bring in like all the equity and they're looking to be a co-GP, we're open to it. I think that's enough value for us to have that discussion. Yeah. Right. But yeah, that's typically how we're approaching it. And then to answer your question on the splits, it depends. I think a standard in our industry is 70-30, but I've seen 75-25, 80-20. It just depends.
There's a ton of different ways to structure the deal and do a waterfall. I just didn't know what you had been seeing and kind of if they have shifted, if you talked to them prior to the great unwinding that we're having now, or, so, okay. So I guess any other, tips, advice that you would have for anybody that, again, we talked to a lot of real estate professionals, anything you wanted to leave them with?
Yeah, I would say one thing that like a lot of people when they leave college, they think paying for any type of course is a scam and things like that. But I never understood it. Like you're willing to go into debt for school, but not like pay money for some type of course that can help you make money. A lot of times for people in my generation, they're going to college and getting in debt and then aren't even able to get a job. So like the mindset there where you're spending money to potentially not make any money in return, but then you're not willing to spend a little bit of money on a course that is going to help you make more money. I think that philosophy is backwards. So for me, I've been willing to invest in my education when it comes to the non-traditional route, which is real estate. I think a lot of people should be willing to do that as well. Going into mastermind groups and surrounding yourself with people who are doing what you want to do is going to be the fastest way that you can get to your goals and actually start investing in real estate. So that's what I would recommend is start surrounding yourself with people that are doing it.
Great advice. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible that you wouldn't spend money on something that college, everybody's just kind of like, you should go to college. You need to go to college. And a lot of people don't know what they want to do when they go to college. And if you're out and you're like, hey, I've got some money. I know I want to do that. Spend a few bucks on learning it. It's like shorten your learning curve a lot faster. So, all right. Well, Jeffrey, it's been awesome catching up. I want to ask you some rapid fire questions before we go. What's your favorite pastime that's not related to business?
I love playing soccer.
All right. So you're having a field day right now watching the Fiefs?
Oh, you know it, man.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Team US, man.
Brazil's playing right now, so I think they're up like maybe 5-0 now. Not
Are they? Yeah.
It was 4-0 when I got on the call.
Yeah, you're watching it off on the side.
No. It's all focused.
Yeah. All right. So what's the best thing or memory that's happened to you or your family in the past like 60 days?
Yeah. I spent the time in San Francisco, as I was telling you before this call. I was able to go to Yosemite, so that was awesome.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I want to go. My neighbors have been, and they rave about it, and I haven't had the chance. So yeah. All right. And then name one or two people who've been most influential in the way you think or your success. Yeah,
I'd say my two brothers. That's one person, and then Mark Kenny.
Your two brothers is one person. You have melded. All right. Well, thanks again, Jeffrey, for jumping on. I've got your contact information. It's in the show notes. If anybody wants to reach out to you, it's been great getting to catch up and learn more. And thanks for sharing some valuable insights on the real estate industry.
100%. Thank you so much, Randall, for having me. I appreciate it.
Right on. Did you know that 80% of the agents we speak with got into real estate in order to gain passive income so they could obtain financial freedom and become work optional? If you want to stay up to date, the best way is to make sure you're subscribed. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do it now. We'll catch you on the next episode.